Hello and welcome to this lecture on distribution tables and graphs. This lecture will look at how to construct, analyze frequency distributions as well as graphical representations of data. So let's look at the different types of distributions. We have a frequency distribution, which is a table reporting the number of observations falling into each category of the variable. We have proportion distributions, which is a relative frequency distribution obtained by dividing the frequency in each category, or cell, by the total number of cases. And then last we have a percentage distribution, which is pretty much the same as a proportion distribution, but we're going to multiply that proportion by 100 to obtain the percentage. Let's look at some examples of these. Alright, so first here we have a distribution table that is for nominal or ordinal data. So this example here is actually ordinal level data, but it's going to be the same if it's nominal or ordinal in this case. So the first column we have is right here, which is the variable categories. So the categories for this variable, which is think of self as liberal or conservative, is extremely liberal, liberal, slightly liberal, moderate, slightly conservative, conservative, extremely conservative, and then we have a total number of cases here. And then down here we have some non-valid responses, which are things like they didn't know, they didn't answer, etc. The second column here that's highlighted in red is the frequency. So this is the number of people who selected this category. So 77 people selected extremely liberal, 179 selected liberal, 161 slightly liberal, so on and so forth. And we can see that moderate here had the most responses with 537. This will be the modal response, which means the most people responded with moderate. That's the modal response. That's a frequency distribution. Next, we have what is called a percent distribution. And again, the percent distribution is going to be very similar to the proportional distribution, with the exception that this percent is multiplied by 100 to get that percentage. A proportional distribution would be, for example, for a percent of 5.1, a proportional distribution would be 0.051. But this percent distribution shows the percentage of total people who responded to each category. So we can see that a frequency of 77 people who responded extremely liberal means that 5.1% of our total number of people responded with extremely liberal. And you can see it goes down. Notice that our total here is 95.8. That is because this percentage distribution also includes the people who answered that they didn't know or they didn't answer, etc. So what we may want to pay attention to then, instead of this just percentage, we may want to pay attention to the valid percent. This is the same as the percentage distribution, except that we are only including people who responded to the question. So we're excluding people who responded with don't know or didn't have an answer. So this is going to be our valid percentage, people who answered the question correctly, and people who actually answered the question and didn't respond with don't know or no answer. And as you can see, the numbers change slightly. So, and when we get to our total, we have 100. So 5.4% of the people who actually answered this question are extremely liberal, 12.5 are liberal, and then you have down here 4.5 are extremely conservative, 16.4 are conservative, and then again the modal category, the category with the most people in it, is this moderate category, 37.4. Last, we have what is called a cumulative percent. And this cumulative percent is looking at how many people are in that category plus the categories that came before it. So, for example, 5.4% are extremely liberal. 17.8% are liberal or extremely liberal. So it's a combination of those two categories. 29% are slightly liberal or extremely liberal. So that 29.0% includes the categories of extremely liberal, and slightly liberal. And so you could say that this category is 29% of people said that they were liberal in some fashion. And so we can make that sort of claim. 66.4% said they were moderate or liberal, and so on and so forth. And so this cumulative percentage is that category plus all the categories that came before it. All right, next let's look at a distribution table for interval or ratio level data. So this table is looking at the number of children, that's the variable, and then we have various categories for the number of children, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a discrete level measure, which means that we are not talking about 1.2 children or 2.4 children or 4.8 children. We're talking about a discrete value, 1, 2. There's a minimum unit size, which is 1 or 0, right? You can't have half a child. And again, we have the number of children listed here. We have the frequency that fall into that category. So, 13 respondents had 0 children, 9 respondents had 1 child, 6 respondents had 2 children, 8 respondents 3, and then 1 for the rest of the categories. And again, we have the percentage distribution over here. Yeah. So this is the frequency, and this is the percentage. 32.5% of the respondents did not have any children. 22.5% had 1. 15 had 2, 20 had 3, and then 2.5 had 4, 2.5 had 5, etc. So that's a table for interval or ratio level data. Next, let's look at some graphical representations of data. So this is a bar graph. And a bar graph is a graph showing the differences in frequencies or percentages among categories of a nominal or ordinal variable. And so all that's saying is that instead of having that frequency distribution and percentage distribution that we had for the first table, this is a similar thing but in graphical form with some nice pretty colors in this case. And what this is saying is that about 35 people said that apple was the nicest fruit. About 30 said orange was the nicest fruit, about 10 said it was banana, 25 kiwi, 40 people said that blueberry was the nicest fruit. I don't know that blueberry is actually a fruit, but we'll let them have it. And about 5 said grapes were the nicest fruit. And so this is just a graphical way of representing that table that we looked at earlier for nominal and ordinal variables. If we want to look at interval ratio level data, then we're going to have to use what is called a histogram. And so a histogram looks at ranges. So again, if we're talking about number of children or income or anything like that that is interval ratio, we're going to be looking at ranges. And so what this histogram is representing is a graphical representation of interval and ratio level data. And you'll notice there are no gaps between each column, and basically it's representing the number of people who fall into that range down here. And in contrast to the histogram, if we look at the bar chart, you'll notice that there's gaps between each category. Alright, that is it for today. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day. I'll see you again soon.